Musashi was first conceived in the 1930s, a time when Japan's efforts to expand its territory and influence in Asia and the Pacific were increasingly blocked by its former ally, the United States.
Japanese national prestige had been dealt an insult by the Washington Naval Treaty. Just to put it in numbers, the treaty created circumstances where for every 100 United States warships that are built, the Japanese are permitted 60. It created a future in which the Japanese Imperial Navy was going to be numerically inferior to the United States Navy.
In response, a powerful faction begins advocating for a different strategy.
Japan at the time had neither the resources nor the budget to build a large number of battleships to fight against the US. So they decided to counter quantity with quality. That was the idea they came up with.
Quality meant constructing giant battleships that could overcome the enemy's larger numbers. The new battleship was called the Yamato class after its prototype. To win public support, this Navy handbook likens it to a powerful figure in a popular movie of the time. The Hollywood film about a giant ape creating mayhem in New York was a huge hit with Japanese audiences.
And so the comparison is not just a comparison evocative of power and strength. It's also kind of pointed squarely at New York City and therefore pointed directly at the Americans.
In March 1938, construction of Musashi began here at the Mitsubishi shipyard in Nagasaki. Incredibly, the giant gantry crane that built her is still in use today.
The Japanese virtually had to reinvent naval architecture and design of ships to be able to build such colossal vessels.
Work proceeded under a literal veil of secrecy.
When they were being built, they were actually built behind gigantic curtains that were raised up at the shipyards, and so even friendly people couldn't see what was going on behind there. So there was some attempt to keep it a secret.
A schoolgirl at the time, Ms. Matsura remembers what it was like.
I was told never to look in the direction of the shipyard, that soldiers are on board keeping watch. You must not look, or the soldiers will take you away. Even as a child, I kind of sensed that a big war was going to break out.
On December 7th, 1941, that war began. In its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Navy used carrier-based air power to devastating effect against the American fleet. Ironically, that success only reinforced its faith in its own new super battleships.
A lot of the naval theory at the time was based on this fleet-on-fleet engagement. The Japanese in particular were still hoping for that kind of thing. This is how you wrest sea control from the other guy. You defeat his fleet.
In August 1942, Musashi began secret sea trials. Weapons and defenses, carefully kept out of sight from enemy spies, were put to the test.
Musashi's main armament came in the form of 3 turrets mounting 3 Type 94 naval guns. These were of 18-inch caliber and were therefore the largest naval guns in use anywhere in the world.
To defend herself, Musashi was shielded by the heaviest armor ever used on a ship's hull. The high-grade steel came from low-phosphorus iron secretly mined in Japanese-occupied Manchuria. For 19-year-old Masahiro Oishi and the hundreds of young sailors assigned to serve aboard this giant, Musashi was a technological wonder.
We never thought for a second that Musashi would sink and people would die. We believed that such a giant ship could not be taken down.
To them, she was the King Kong of the sea.